At 19, Amelia Thompson had already learned the cruel lesson that life often demanded impossible sacrifices. Born in the small, wind-beaten town of Silver Creek, she had grown up amidst the dry dust of dirt roads, the low hum of cattle, and the constant chatter of neighbors who seemed to know everything about everyone. Her father, a once proud ranch hand who had struggled to keep the family afloat, had passed away just months ago, leaving a fragile household with debts piling higher than anyone dared to count. Amelia's mother had done her best to maintain dignity, but the mounting bills and the cold stares from local lenders made it clear that their survival depended on choices no young woman should ever have to make. It was Jackson Cole, the wealthiest man in the county, who stepped into their lives like a shadow. Jackson was a legend in Silver Creek, partly admired, partly feared. He owned thousands of acres of land, herds of prize cattle, and a manor that could rival the governor's. He was a man who seemed to command everything he touched, his life carefully curated, disciplined, and unyielding. He was rumored to be cold, with a temper as sharp as the knives he carried for cattle work. And yet the townspeople spoke of his generosity, though always with a hint of awe, as though his kindness was measured and calculated. Amelia never thought she would meet him, certainly never that he would become a part of her life. And yet, here she was, standing in the doorway of her family's modest home, clutching a small leather satchel with a few belongings. Her mother's hands trembled as she pressed a folded note into Amelia's hand. "Do what you must. We have no choice." Tears blurred Amelia's vision, but she swallowed her fear. The carriage waited outside, its wheels kicking up small clouds of dust in the early morning light. The journey to the Cole Ranch, a place she had seen only from afar on the rare occasions she ventured near the outskirts of town, would mark the beginning of a life that was hers no longer. The ride itself was long and arduous. The countryside stretched endlessly, fields of gold and brown undulating beneath the sun, and Amelia's thoughts wandered ceaselessly. She imagined the ranch, the man who would now dictate her days, and the uncertain future that awaited her. Every tree she passed seemed to whisper warnings. Every shadow seemed to echo the stories she had heard about Jackson Cole. She tried to focus on the beauty around her, the wind brushing against her face, the distant mountains that rose like silent sentinels, but the knot in her stomach never loosened. When the carriage finally crested a hill, the ranch came into view. It was larger than anything Amelia had ever imagined. A sprawling estate of barns, stables, and neatly fenced paddocks extended as far as her eyes could see. Beyond that, the main house stood like a fortress, its timber walls gleaming in the sunlight, windows reflecting the open sky. Amelia felt her heart pound, not with excitement, but with a sense of dread. She had imagined wealth in her dreams, but this grandeur was intimidating. It was not welcoming. It was a kingdom, and she was a visitor who had no claim to it. The carriage slowed as it approached the main gate, and the staff, stalwart men and women in dust-streaked uniforms, watched silently. The clop of the horses' hooves against the gravel seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet morning. Amelia's stomach churned. When she stepped down, she felt every eye on her, measuring her, as if she were already being judged. Then she saw him, Jackson Cole. He stood tall, as immovable as a statue, his broad shoulders draped in a simple yet expensive shirt, his worn boots hinting at decades of ranch life. His hat shadowed his face, but his eyes, dark, sharp, and unflinching, fixed on her instantly. Amelia felt herself shrink under his gaze. She had imagined 100 ways this encounter could unfold, none of them pleasant. And yet nothing had prepared her for the intensity of being looked at as though her very existence were a transaction. Jackson did not speak at first. He extended a gloved hand, which Amelia hesitated to shake. Finally, she did, and the handshake was firm, grounding her in the reality that this was no temporary arrangement. This man was her husband now, not by choice, but by circumstance, and there was no turning back. He led her through the estate, past neatly lined barns where horses stamped impatiently, past grazing cattle that seemed indifferent to human affairs, and finally to the manor itself. The house was a mixture of rustic charm and unyielding luxury. Polished wood floors gleamed under the sunlight streaming through enormous windows. Thick rugs cushioned the rooms, and paintings of past generations, stern-looking men and women with piercing eyes, adorned the walls. Amelia felt herself shrinking again, this time within the vastness of the space. Everything here spoke of control, wealth, and legacy. She wondered where she fit in this story, if at all. Dinner that first evening was quiet. Jackson ate with measured precision, and Amelia followed his lead, unsure of what was expected of her. The staff moved silently, anticipating their master's unspoken commands. Words were few, and the air was thick with tension. Amelia's mind raced with thoughts of escape, of rebellion, of pleading. But the weight of duty pressed on her shoulders like an invisible yoke. She realized that this was not a place where emotions could be openly displayed. Here, control and restraint ruled above all else. That night, in her room, Amelia allowed herself to breathe. She looked out the window at the sprawling ranch, the moonlight casting long shadows across the land. There was beauty here, undeniable and breathtaking, yet it was the kind of beauty that demanded submission. She felt a strange mix of awe and fear. Jackson had his own plans for her, she knew, plans that extended beyond mere marriage. And though she did not yet understand them, she sensed that whatever came next would change not only her life, but the perception of her entire town. Sleep was difficult. The night seemed alive with whispers of possibility and threat alike. Amelia thought of her family, of the town she had left behind, and of the man who now controlled her destiny. She did not know if she would find love or merely live in a gilded cage, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Life at Cole Ranch would demand courage she had never had to summon before. And whether she would rise to meet it or break under its weight remained a question only time could answer. Little did she know, the coming days would bring surprises far beyond her imagination, and a wedding gift from Jackson Cole would be the first shock that left everyone, herself included, utterly speechless. The morning of Amelia Thompson's wedding arrived with an uneasy mix of anticipation, fear, and a brittle hope she didn't fully understand. The sky over Silver Creek was painted in soft hues of pink and gold, but to Amelia it seemed cold, distant, as though even the sun understood the weight of her circumstances. She awoke in her room at Cole Ranch, the first rays of sunlight spilling across the polished floor, casting long shadows that reminded her she was no longer in a familiar place. The wedding itself was scheduled for mid-morning, an event meant to celebrate the union of Jackson Cole, the town's wealthiest man, and Amelia, the young woman whose family's debts had forced her into marriage. The town buzzed with curiosity. Invitations had been sent to prominent townsfolk, ranchers, merchants, and even the local judge, each person whispering and speculating about Amelia and Jackson. Rumors had painted Amelia as a timid girl coerced into the union, while Jackson was portrayed as a man who had yet to know the warmth of a human heart. The stage was set for a spectacle, an event that promised drama, judgment, and gossip in equal measure. Amelia's wedding gown was simple yet elegant, a flowing white dress that contrasted with her anxious demeanor. Her hair was braided carefully, a few strands escaping to frame her pale, tense face. She barely recognized herself in the mirror. In another life, she imagined this day would have been different, perhaps a wedding full of choice, love, and laughter. But fate had written a harsher story, and Amelia now found herself a reluctant bride, stepping into a life she had not chosen. Jackson, meanwhile, prepared with a quiet determination. He did not display nerves or excitement. His composure was almost unnatural. He dressed in a crisp suit that subtly reflected his wealth, the silver buttons catching the sunlight as he adjusted his tie. Unlike Amelia, Jackson's expression was inscrutable, his face a mask of control. Even the ranch hands, who had grown accustomed to his moods, felt the tension in the air that morning. Something about this wedding felt unlike any other, as if Jackson had planned more than the ceremony itself. The ceremony was held in the sprawling courtyard of the ranch, where rows of wooden chairs had been arranged meticulously for the guests. A simple arch, adorned with wildflowers, framed the space where Amelia and Jackson would exchange vows. The townspeople began arriving, their whispers creating a low hum of curiosity. Eyes were drawn to Amelia as she entered, delicate and hesitant, clutching the bouquet of wildflowers she had chosen herself. A small act of autonomy in a day otherwise ruled by obligation. The ceremony commenced with the officiant's voice, solemn and deliberate, echoing through the courtyard. Amelia's hands trembled slightly as she took her place beside Jackson. She stole a glance at him, hoping for a glimmer of reassurance. Jackson's dark eyes met hers for only a moment, unreadable, before returning to the officiant. The words were spoken, vows exchanged, promises made. Though Amelia felt the weight of each one more as a chain than a commitment born of love. And then came the moment that would forever mark the wedding in the town's memory, Jackson's gift. After the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Jackson reached into his coat pocket and retrieved a small, brack, but his, intricately wrapped box. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The gift was unexpected. Many assumed he would present a lavish jewel or a token of money, yet Jackson's hands were steady as he placed the box in Amelia's hands, bowing his head slightly in a gesture that was at once formal and personal. Amelia's fingers fumbled with the ribbon, curious and nervous. When she opened the box, gasps rose from the crowd. Inside was a deed, an official, legal document, granting Amelia sole ownership of a portion of Jackson's land. Not a token piece, but an entire section of the ranch, acres of fertile soil, grazing fields, and even the rights to a small cluster of stables and a lakefront. It was a gift that no one had anticipated. In a town obsessed with wealth, power, and social hierarchy, Jackson had given Amelia autonomy, independence, and respect. something that defied the very notion of a forced marriage. The crowd was stunned into silence. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some could not comprehend the generosity or audacity of Jackson's gesture. Others were scandalized that a man of his standing would give such power to a young bride. Amelia herself was speechless, her fingers trembling as she held the deed. For the first time that day, she felt a sense of agency, a flicker of hope that she might navigate this new life on her own terms. Jackson's expression softened almost imperceptibly as he observed her reaction. In that moment, the stoic, intimidating man seemed to reveal a trace of vulnerability, a subtle acknowledgement that he understood the weight of what he had just given her. For Amelia, the gift was more than land. It was a declaration of trust, a promise that though she had entered this marriage under duress, Jackson was willing to respect her boundaries and her potential. The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur of smiles, handshakes, and congratulations. Guests approached Amelia cautiously, offering polite remarks tinged with envy, awe, or judgment. Jackson remained at her side, a silent protector and observer, guiding her through the crowd without overt interference. The contrast between the town's assumptions and the reality of Jackson's actions was striking. Many had expected a cold, transactional marriage, yet the wedding gift hinted at a man capable of generosity, foresight, and even empathy. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Amelia took a moment to step away from the crowd. Wandering to the edge of her newly acquired land, she looked over the fields, the rolling hills, and the stables that now belonged in part to her. The enormity of the gift was overwhelming. It symbolized freedom, opportunity, and an unexpected respect from the man she was married to. The deed in her hands was more than paper. It was a key to a future she never thought possible. That evening, as the wedding celebrations wound down, Amelia felt a shift within herself. She no longer viewed Jackson solely as a captor or a figure of authority. The gift had spoken louder than words, revealing a side of him that few in Silver Creek had ever witnessed. Amelia realized that while the marriage had been forced, her life was no longer without choice. With the land under her name and Jackson's unexpected gesture of respect, she held the power to shape her own destiny within the marriage. And though the town would talk for weeks, maybe months, about the audacity and generosity of Jackson Cole, Amelia understood the deeper truth. This wedding, which began under duress, had introduced her to the possibility of a partnership that balanced authority with respect, wealth with independence, and obligation with genuine human consideration. The shocking gift, given in front of everyone, silenced not only the crowd, but also her own fears, planting the seeds of hope for a future that might, against all odds, be hers to embrace. The days following Amelia's wedding passed in a delicate rhythm, a mixture of routine and unspoken tension that defined life at Cole Ranch. Amelia awoke each morning to the gentle creak of the manor's wooden floors, sunlight filtering through the expansive windows, casting long, golden beams across her room. Though she had inherited a portion of the ranch through Jackson's astonishing wedding gift, the vast estate still felt like an unfamiliar world. A place where every corridor, every stables, and every pasture seemed designed to remind her of how far she was from the simple life she once knew. Jackson Cole, for his part, was relentless in his routines. He rose with the sun, checking on the cattle, inspecting fences, and making rounds of the property. His life had always been governed by discipline, and despite the marriage, he expected the same commitment and respect from Amelia. But unlike Amelia's initial fear, she began to notice small gestures that hinted at Jackson's complexities. A nod of approval when she correctly identified the weight of a feed sack. A quiet word of guidance when she struggled with a stubborn gait. These moments, fleeting though they were, revealed that Jackson's strict exterior was not cruelty, but precision. A way of managing a life that demanded efficiency, responsibility, and respect for the land. Amelia, meanwhile, began her own journey of adaptation. The land deed, once a shocking gift, now became a symbol of her growing autonomy. She walked the fields, studying the livestock, learning the rhythms of the ranch. Every morning, she rose early to assist the ranch hands, sometimes clumsily, sometimes with surprising skill. She discovered muscles she never knew she had. The sting of sunburn on her arms, the ache in her back after lifting bales of hay, and the thrill of seeing a herd respond to her guidance. Each day, her confidence grew, not because she had chosen this life, but because she was learning to navigate it, to claim a small measure of control over her destiny. Jackson observed her quietly during these days, often from a distance. He noticed the way she moved through the pastures, how she handled the horses, and how her eyes lit up when she mastered a new skill. He did not praise her openly, but there was a subtle pride in his gaze, a recognition that Amelia was not the fragile girl he, or the town, had assumed she was. Gradually, he began to include her in decisions about the ranch, asking for her opinion on matters as small as which horses should be paired for breeding, and as significant as how to allocate grazing fields for maximum yield. Amelia was surprised by how much he valued her judgment, and in turn, she began to see Jackson not just as a wealthy, intimidating figure, but as a man with knowledge, vision, and a willingness to respect the contributions of others. The interactions between them were initially stiff, each word weighed and measured. Conversations were often interrupted by the demands of ranch life, an escaped cow, a broken fence, or the arrival of a new shipment of supplies. Yet, amidst the bustle, small moments of connection emerged. One evening, Amelia struggled to calm a particularly skittish horse, its eyes wide with panic, and its hooves threatening to kick anyone nearby. Jackson, silently appearing beside her, guided her hand with gentle precision, showing her how to position herself, how to read the horse's body language. She felt a warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and an unexpected trust. Evenings at the manor became another space for discovery. After the day's work, Jackson and Amelia shared meals in the dining hall. Their conversations, once formal and minimal, began to touch on personal matters, childhood stories, favorite memories, and fleeting dreams of what life could have been. Jackson spoke sparingly, but with depth, revealing a past that was both lonely and disciplined, shaped by responsibility and loss. Amelia shared her own experiences of growing up in Silver Creek, the struggles her family faced, and the fleeting moments of happiness she had cherished. These exchanges were small, almost imperceptible steps toward understanding, yet they laid the foundation for a mutual respect neither had expected. The townspeople continued to watch their marriage closely, whispering about the young bride and the enigmatic cowboy. Some doubted that Amelia could adapt to the rigors of ranch life, while others speculated about Jackson's true intentions. Yet, within the walls of Cole Ranch, a quiet transformation was underway. Amelia was discovering resilience and capability she had never known, while Jackson was learning that trust and respect could be offered without compromising authority. A turning point came one afternoon when a sudden storm struck the ranch. Heavy rain poured across the fields, and Amelia was in the pastures, tending to the horses, when the wind whipped violently. One of the horses broke free, galloping toward the edge of the property. Panic surged through Amelia, but before she could react fully, Jackson was there, calm and commanding, guiding both her and the horse to safety. After the storm, soaked and exhausted, they shared a moment of quiet acknowledgement. Words were unnecessary. The mutual respect, the shared experience, and the trust forged in crisis spoke louder than any conversation could. Amelia realized that Jackson's presence was no longer a shadow over her life, but a partner she could rely on, someone whose strength complemented her own. As the weeks passed, their understanding deepened. Amelia began to make small decisions on her own, from managing crop rotations to overseeing the care of newborn calves. Jackson observed these decisions with approval, occasionally offering guidance, but more often stepping back, allowing her autonomy to flourish. Their partnership became a balance of authority and freedom, discipline and trust. Amelia no longer felt like a pawn in a social arrangement. She was a participant, shaping her life and the ranch alongside her husband. Even at night, when the manor was silent, Amelia and Jackson found moments of connection. They walked the land together under starlit skies, discussing plans for the future, sharing quiet laughter, and revealing pieces of themselves previously hidden from the world. Each conversation, each shared task, each crisis weathered together, strengthened the bond between them. The forced marriage that had begun with tension and fear was evolving into a partnership built on respect, understanding, and the recognition of each other's strengths. By the end of the first month, Amelia understood that life at Cole Ranch was not just about survival. It was about growth, learning, and unexpected opportunity. The man who had seemed so intimidating and cold on her arrival was proving to be complex, capable of generosity and guidance. Jackson, in turn, was discovering that Amelia's spirit, intelligence, and resilience were qualities that no wealth or power could replicate. What had begun as a marriage of necessity was slowly transforming into a union founded on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and a cautious but growing affection. Amelia often reflected on how far she had come, from a frightened girl thrust into an unfamiliar world to a capable, confident woman carving out her own space within it. Jackson, too, began to see that the young bride he had met on that fateful morning was not just a symbol of family obligation, but a partner in every sense that mattered. Their lives, once defined by duty, were beginning to merge into something far richer, more complex, and unexpectedly hopeful. Life at Cole Ranch was not without its challenges. The initial honeymoon of understanding between Amelia and Jackson gradually gave way to the realities of ranch life, societal expectations, and the lingering whispers of the town. Amelia had learned to navigate her new role with grace and determination, but every step forward was accompanied by obstacles that tested her resolve, patience, and even her trust in Jackson. The first challenge came in the form of skepticism from the townspeople. Silver Creek was a small town where news traveled faster than the wind, and the marriage of Amelia Thompson to Jackson Cole was the topic of every whispered conversation. While some admired Jackson's generosity in granting Amelia a portion of the ranch, many others questioned the wisdom of giving a young bride such autonomy. Merchants and neighbors speculated openly about Amelia's capabilities, doubting she could manage land, livestock, and finances effectively. Some even suggested that Jackson was naive to trust her with such responsibilities, while others hinted at scandal. What if she failed, or worse, betrayed his trust? Amelia felt the weight of these judgments. Every decision she made, whether about the grazing fields, the breeding of horses, or the maintenance of equipment, was scrutinized. A careless remark from a visiting rancher could undermine her confidence for days. She began to understand that her marriage was not only a personal challenge, but a public performance, with every action observed and evaluated by the people who had once known her as a simple girl from Silver Creek. Yet she refused to be cowed. With Jackson's quiet support, she approached each task with diligence and care, determined to prove that she was more than the sum of the town's assumptions. Jackson, too, faced pressures. While his marriage had been arranged to meet practical ends, he now had to balance his expectations of Amelia with the public perception of their union. Some townspeople still treated him as cold or heartless, unaware of the subtle ways he was fostering Amelia's independence. He also had to manage the ranch's day-to-day operations, from ensuring the herds were healthy to negotiating with buyers and suppliers. The stress of running such a vast enterprise weighed heavily on him, and at times his patience frayed. Yet he learned, gradually, to temper his authority with empathy, recognizing that Amelia was not merely a bride, but a partner whose strengths could complement his own. The first major conflict arose when a neighboring rancher, envious of Jackson's wealth and wary of Amelia's growing influence, attempted to undermine her authority. He deliberately spread false rumors about her mismanaging livestock and failing to maintain proper records, hoping to provoke Jackson's anger and discredit her in the eyes of the community. When Amelia first heard the whispers, she felt a pang of frustration and humiliation. She had worked tirelessly, mastering skills she had never imagined herself capable of, and yet all her efforts were being questioned. Jackson's response was measured but firm. He summoned the neighboring rancher to the estate and, in front of witnesses, presented clear evidence of Amelia's diligence and competence. He spoke not with anger, but with authority, his words leaving no room for dispute. The public vindication was powerful, but more importantly, it deepened the bond between Amelia and Jackson. Amelia realized that Jackson's trust in her was not superficial. He truly respected her abilities and was willing to defend her publicly. This moment marked a turning point in their relationship, one of loyalty, trust, and shared purpose. Amelia also faced personal challenges in adapting to the harsh realities of ranch life. One day, a sudden outbreak of illness struck the livestock, threatening to decimate part of the herd. Amelia, who had become deeply involved in the ranch's operations, worked alongside Jackson and the ranch hands for hours, tending to the sick animals, administering medicine, and managing quarantines. She experienced exhaustion, frustration, and fear, yet the ordeal also revealed her resilience. Jackson observed her tirelessly, sometimes offering guidance, sometimes silently acknowledging her ingenuity. By the end of the crisis, Amelia's confidence had grown immeasurably. She had faced adversity, persevered, and earned not only Jackson's respect, but her own. Beyond the ranch itself, the marriage had social challenges. Amelia struggled with the town's persistent gossip and judgment, often encountering old acquaintances who could not reconcile the timid girl they once knew with the competent, independent woman she had become. Some openly expressed jealousy, others offered condescending advice, and a few tried to manipulate situations to their advantage. Amelia navigated these encounters carefully, learning to assert herself while maintaining the dignity expected of a Cole. Jackson, protective yet respectful, offered guidance when necessary but never intruded unnecessarily, allowing Amelia to establish her own voice in the community. As the months passed, Amelia and Jackson faced another challenge: the emotional complexities of their forced union. While they had developed mutual respect, feelings of affection were tentative and unspoken. Amelia sometimes struggled with fear and resentment, questioning whether she could truly be happy in a marriage that had begun under duress. Jackson, in turn, wrestled with his own emotions, recognizing that he admired Amelia's intelligence, courage, and resilience, yet unsure how to express his feelings appropriately. They both learned to communicate through actions rather than words, a shared task, a moment of guidance, a small gesture of trust. A particularly intense moment occurred when a sudden storm damaged part of the ranch. Fences collapsed, a barn partially flooded, and several animals were at risk. Amelia and Jackson worked side by side, coordinating efforts to save the livestock and repair the damage. The storm tested their endurance, patience, and ability to cooperate under pressure. By the time the rain subsided, both were drenched and exhausted. But the shared struggle forged a connection that words could not capture. In that moment, the forced marriage felt less like an obligation and more like a partnership. They had faced adversity together and emerged stronger, united by purpose and respect. Through these challenges, Amelia's transformation was evident. She had entered the marriage uncertain, fearful, and constrained by the town's expectations. By confronting each obstacle, she discovered courage, intelligence, and resilience she had never recognized in herself. Jackson, too, evolved, learning that control did not require dominance, and that leadership could coexist with empathy and respect. Together, they navigated the complexities of ranch life, societal scrutiny, and personal growth, gradually reshaping their forced union into something far more meaningful. By the end of the first year, the town of Silver Creek could no longer dismiss Amelia Thompson as a naive girl or underestimate her influence. Jackson's shocking wedding gift, once viewed as an unusual gesture, had become the foundation for a partnership that balanced power, respect, and shared responsibility. Though the marriage had begun with coercion, the challenges they faced together had transformed it into a union defined not by obligation, but by trust, mutual understanding, and an emerging sense of genuine connection. Months had passed since Amelia Thompson's reluctant marriage to Jackson Cole, and life at Cole Ranch had settled into a rhythm that was both challenging and rewarding. The initial shock of the wedding, Jackson's astonishing gift of land, and the whispered judgments of Silver Creek had gradually given way to something unexpected. A genuine partnership built on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and an emerging understanding of each other's hearts. Amelia had transformed. The timid girl who had arrived at the ranch 18 months earlier was gone, replaced by a confident, capable young woman who had claimed her place not only within the household, but across the sprawling acres of Cole Ranch. She managed livestock, oversaw crop rotations, coordinated with ranch hands, and even handled negotiations with suppliers. Each success, small or large, reinforced her growing autonomy and sense of purpose. She had come to understand that the wedding gift, a portion of the ranch in her name, was not only a symbol of Jackson's trust, but also a tangible declaration that she had a stake in this life. Jackson had changed as well. Though he had always been a man of discipline, wealth, and authority, the marriage forced him to confront emotions he had carefully suppressed for years. Amelia's presence revealed that leadership could coexist with compassion, that strength could be tempered with patience, and that respect could foster loyalty far deeper than fear or intimidation ever could. Jackson learned to communicate with her, not merely through commands or silent observation, but with encouragement, guidance, and subtle gestures that conveyed trust and regard. The bond between them deepened with each shared task, each crisis weathered, and each quiet conversation beneath the open skies of the ranch. The turning point that solidified their relationship and stunned the town came during the annual Silver Creek Harvest Festival, a long-standing tradition celebrating the community's agricultural achievements. It was a chance for the townspeople to gather, display their livestock, and witness the social hierarchies of wealth and influence at play. For Amelia and Jackson, it was the perfect stage to reveal how far they had come. Amelia entered the festival grounds confidently, dressed not in a delicate gown designed to display wealth, but in practical attire suited for someone who worked the land herself. She moved with poise and assurance, greeting neighbors, sharing insights about livestock, and demonstrating her knowledge of agriculture. Many townspeople watched in disbelief. The same girl they had imagined fragile and dependent was now commanding respect, offering guidance, and managing conversations with authority. Their murmurs grew louder, not in gossip, but in awe. Jackson observed her from a distance, his pride quietly evident. He had known her capabilities all along, but seeing the community recognize her growth was a moment of satisfaction, proof that his wedding gift had been both wise and transformative. When they were called to present a special award for the best-maintained herd, Jackson placed his hand lightly on Amelia's back, a small but deliberate gesture acknowledging her achievements. The crowd watched closely, interpreting the action as more than mere formality. It was a visible sign of equality, partnership, and respect. Amelia spoke to the crowd, her voice steady and confident. She recounted the challenges she had faced, the lessons she had learned, and the teamwork required to maintain the ranch. Her words were not boastful, but they were powerful, revealing a young woman who had grown into her role, earning admiration rather than pity. The audience responded with applause, their initial doubts about her replaced by admiration for her intelligence, resilience, and grace. Jackson stood beside her, silent but supportive, his presence reinforcing the image of a partnership that was strong, balanced, and genuine. As the festival continued, townspeople approached Amelia and Jackson individually. Merchants, neighbors, and even former skeptics offered congratulations and expressed respect for what they had accomplished together. Some apologized for underestimating her, Others marveled at Jackson's wisdom in trusting her with a stake in the ranch. The couple's reputation shifted dramatically, from a forced union viewed with suspicion to a powerful example of mutual respect and collaboration. The wedding gift, once considered unusual or even reckless, was now seen as a testament to Jackson's insight and Amelia's talent. The quiet moments at the ranch reflected the transformation more intimately. Evening walks through the fields became times for conversation, planning, and shared reflection. They spoke of dreams, expanding the ranch, improving livestock, introducing new crops, and even perhaps starting a family. There was laughter now, a sound that had been absent in the early months of their marriage, as well as moments of quiet companionship, where words were unnecessary. Amelia had come to trust Jackson's judgment, and Jackson had come to rely on Amelia's insight and strength. Their relationship was no longer defined by obligation or societal expectation, but by partnership, trust, and the beginnings of affection. Perhaps the most striking symbol of their evolution occurred when Amelia, one evening, invited Jackson to walk along the edge of the property she had been given in her name. The sunset painted the fields in gold and amber, the sky reflecting the calm confidence she now carried. She showed him the fences she had repaired, the pasture rotations she had managed, and the horses she had trained. Jackson listened, asking questions, offering suggestions, and acknowledging her achievements. In that moment, the boundaries between master and bride dissolved. They were collaborators, equals, and partners, a team in the fullest sense. The townspeople, too, recognized the change. Over the following weeks, whispers turned into admiration, skepticism into respect. Amelia and Jackson became a model couple, not for romance alone, but for the strength of partnership, the balance of authority and independence, and the courage to defy expectations. Their marriage, born of necessity and forced circumstance, had grown into something remarkable. Jackson's shocking wedding gift had not only empowered Amelia, but had paved the way for a union that would be remembered throughout Silver Creek as both unconventional and inspiring. By the end of that first year, the couple had achieved harmony. Amelia had grown into a capable rancher and a respected member of the community, while Jackson had learned that leadership and wealth did not require domination or control. Together, they had faced adversity, earned trust, and discovered that a marriage forged under duress could transform into a partnership marked by respect, admiration, and the subtle beginnings of love. The town, once eager to gossip and judge, now regarded them with awe and quiet envy. Their story became one not of coercion, but of empowerment, a tale that would be told for generations as an example of how trust, vision, and courage could reshape even the most unlikely unions. And in the quiet evenings, walking together beneath the starlit sky of the Cole Ranch, Amelia and Jackson felt a profound truth, that the bond between them, forged in circumstance, had blossomed into something far greater than either could have anticipated. A marriage had started with obligation, but it had grown into respect, partnership, and hope, an unexpected, remarkable journey that silenced the town, transformed their lives, and promised a future full of possibilities.